Hey, what's up everyone? Tim here from Ung Studio, and today we are transforming this YouTube studio into this one. To do that, let's start from the beginning. When I started this channel back in May 2020, I didn't know how long I'd be doing it for. I'm sure you've had ideas in the past that you decided to pursue, only to realize that maybe they weren't the right fit for you, and because of that, you stopped pursuing them. That's exactly what I was thinking when I first started this YouTube channel here. When I first started, I was afraid to be recorded on audio, and I was also afraid to be recorded on camera. So having those two things being my biggest fears, I didn't know if I could actually have a YouTube channel that I would sustain for a long period of time. The other thing that I didn't know if I'd be able to do was come up with so many different designs for products and architecture, because it's so hard to come up with these designs from concept through to completion and showcase it through a video to an audience like you. Now that it's been a little while here on YouTube for me, I'm finally a little more comfortable in front of a camera and being recorded. The other thing that I finally decided to do was to get rid of the backdrop behind me and to renovate the basement that I'm actually recording in. My studio is located in my house's basement, and in the past, the previous owners actually installed some really thin wood. That thin wood ended up warping because they didn't have any dehumidifiers in the basement. So everything in my basement was kind of wobbling, and I just didn't have the time to fix it, and I also didn't have enough money to fix it up. So now that I've been doing this for enough time, and I know that this YouTube adventure for me is a longer duration than I originally anticipated, I decided that it was the perfect opportunity to turn it into a project of its own. So today, we're going to be renovating my basement and turning it into a YouTube studio. And by that, I'm only renovating half of it, which is on the opposite side of the camera, and that would be behind you. So for today's projects, I'll primarily be using 2x4s and plywood panels. I'll be finishing the plywood panels with oil so that they have some moisture resistance but also have a really nice finish. Once I'm done with that, I'll be installing 2 separate electrical outlets so that I have additional power for any tools that I might want to use in the future, but to also plug in all of the lights that I've designed and made here on this channel. I'll have those sitting in the background at some point, and when they're back there, I'll turn some of them on every now and then just to change the setting a little bit, but to also showcase the products that I'm designing and making here on this channel. Once I'm done with that, I'll also be building 2 separate tables that are not attached to the walls. Those separate tables will have the same finish as the walls because they'll be made out of the same 2x4s and the same plywood. The reason for the 2 different tables that aren't attached is because I want to be able to reorganize the space and get them out of the shot in the future if I ever need to, or connect them together to have a bigger work surface, especially when I start getting back into leatherworking. Once I'm done building all of these things, the last step is going to be taking a step back, looking at my entire space, and seeing what different accessories I want to add. Wall shelving and acoustic panels are 2 out of some of the others that I've been contemplating, but I think those are the primary 2 that I'll be focusing on for this build. Now that you know the background behind today's project, I'm excited to share my process of making it with you. One of the things that I also wanted to mention very briefly is that I'm excited and happy that my fiance was able to help me out with this project. There are so many moments when it comes to designing and making anything where you get frustrated because something just doesn't work out the way that you originally intended. That usually happens when it comes to construction because there are so many things that you have to consider as you're building something physically and trying to put it into place. So I'm grateful that she was here. Now with that, let's jump into the time lapse that I made of this entire project, and then I'll show you how everything came out at the end. So this is the other side of my basement where I tried to finish the concrete walls by smoothing it all out, but I didn't like the way that the finish was looking. So I decided to cut down the 2x4s ahead of time, bring them down to my basement, assemble the frames on the ground, and lift them into place onto the wall. Then I made sure that they were all attached properly, and then I pulled some electrical lines through. Once the electrical lines were in place, I then installed the plywood panels and screwed them on. I used the same method and strategy and finishes to then do the same for my wood tables. Once the wood tables were assembled, I took some Odie's oil, mixed it all up, applied it onto the top surface of the tables, and I spread them out. It was a really nice finish, and I decided to use a different type of oil to finish the walls. Now here I am cutting down the same plywood sheets that I used on the wall. These cut panels will end up becoming the shelving that'll go on the wall directly behind me in the studio, where I'll put all of my lights on display. Once all the plywood panels were cut down to size, I applied the same oil finish that I used on the walls because I wanted the shelves and the wall to match. Then using a lint-free rag, I rubbed in the oil finish to evenly spread it over the surface of the plywood, waited for it to be absorbed, and then I rubbed off the excess oil. Then it was time to apply some spray adhesive to one side of a foam core panel. Once the spray adhesive was evenly spread, it was time to apply the acoustic panels directly onto that foam core. The adhesive panels are really easy to adhere onto the foam core panel when you're using spray adhesive, so that's why I did it on this project. It was a trick that a friend of mine told me about. Now, once all of these panels were done, I brought them down to my basement and started applying them directly onto my ceiling. My ceiling is a popcorn ceiling that's actually applied directly onto some plywood backing. So I took some nails and I just hammered them right into place. Once that was done, it was time to install the brackets that I ordered from Amazon for all of my plywood shelves that I had finished outside. Once the shelves were installed, it was time to take all of my projects out of the cardboard boxes that I temporarily put them in to keep them protected. It took a little bit, but I ended up figuring out how I wanted to organize all of my projects on the shelves and wood tables. So that's how I renovated my basement and turned it into a makerspace and YouTube studio where I can document my process of designing and making the projects that I share here on my channel with you. This project was really fun to work on, and I loved the way that it came out. There were a few moments where I was really frustrated with the process of actually constructing the space because I ran into issues that anyone encounters when renovating any space in their house. The main one is cutting a wood member down to a size that actually doesn't fit or is too perfect of a fit, so to get it into place takes a lot of elbow grease and a lot of hammering. But for me, whenever any of those situations occurred, I stopped and I went back out and recut those pieces. I also limited myself to transporting all of the materials for this project in my 4-door sedan car. It's really hard to do that, and there were plywood pieces like the big 4x4 foot pieces behind me that I actually tried to fit in the car, but I didn't want to mess up the interior of my car, so I called up a friend who had a larger SUV that could fit the pieces inside. I'm really thankful that my friend was able to drive out and help me out at night with that particular part of this project. The other thing I wanted to mention briefly is that I'm excited that I was able to get the sound panels on the ceiling above me, and that I actually went out and built the shelves that you see on the wall behind me. Those two accessories really brought this space to life because it helps me mitigate the sound whenever I'm talking or whenever someone else is in the space sharing the space with me. You don't really hear them, and it really helps me with the audio and the quality of this particular video. I also love the way that all of the shelves behind me came out because I took the time to match them with all of the wall panels so that they would blend in seamlessly and be very minimalistic. The shelves behind me are able to hold all of the light fixtures that I've designed on this channel, and the one thing that I love about that is that they create really nice accent lighting behind me, while the big floodlights in front of me create a nicer illumination on me while I'm in front of the camera talking to you. This space really feels like a place where I can stay focused on my design and crafting work. It also inspires me every day when I walk in to design more products that I can actually attach to the walls and look at as a reminder of all the things that I'm creating. One project that I have in mind right now is actually a graphic that I want to put directly behind me, centered on that wall where I have these accent lights just pointing straight to it. I really want to have a nice motivational wall art so that every time I walk into my space, I can look at it and be inspired to create for that particular day. I have a friend in mind who's going to be helping me design that graphic, so stay tuned for that video in the future. Now with that, I hope you enjoyed this video where you got to see me create a new YouTube studio for myself and get rid of the gray backdrop that I had originally behind me in all of my videos. I really appreciate you for taking the time to follow me and all of the work that I'm producing and sharing here on my YouTube channel. It's because of your support that I'm still here doing the things that I'm doing every day, and I hope to continue doing them and to interact with you more. So thank you again for supporting me through this YouTube adventure of mine, and I hope to see you next time.